Commander Jake Morrison stood in the Orbital Defense Network Control Center, staring at the massive holographic display that filled the entire wall. Another alien ship was passing through Earth's outer solar system, moving with the kind of casual arrogance that made his blood boil. The vessel didn't ask permission, didn't slow down, didn't even acknowledge that this space belonged to anyone. To them, humanity's home system was just empty territory to cruise through whenever they felt like it. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez called out from her station, her voice tight with frustration. "Sir, that's the fourth unauthorized passage this month. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Jake clenched his jaw and forced himself to take a slow breath. He'd been commanding this hidden defense network for 8 years now, and every single day tested his patience. For 43 years, Earth had maintained complete radio silence with the Galaxy Council. While those aliens out there sent invitation after invitation, asking humanity to join their grand alliance, Earth simply watched and listened. No responses, no acknowledgements, nothing. But that silence wasn't what the Council thought it was. Humanity wasn't ignoring them because people were too stupid to figure out how to answer. Earth was learning. Every alien broadcast, every political debate, every military exercise the Council conducted was recorded, analyzed, and stored in massive data centers buried deep underground. Linguists had decoded 17 different alien languages. Military analysts had studied every battle the Council had fought in the past century. Scientists had reverse-engineered alien technology from the rare debris that drifted into the solar system. "Orders, sir?" Amy asked, waiting for his response. "We hold position," Jake said firmly. "Observe only. No engagement." It was the same order he gave every time, and it never got easier. His crew wanted action. Hell, he wanted action. But President Elena Rodriguez had been crystal clear in her directives. Earth wasn't hiding because it was afraid. Earth was preparing. And every day the Council assumed humanity was primitive and backward was another day human scientists made breakthroughs in weapons technology the aliens couldn't imagine. Jake walked over to the intelligence station where Lieutenant Tom Bradley was reviewing the latest Council broadcasts. The young officer looked up with barely concealed anger in his eyes. "You see what that Kralix ambassador said about us yesterday?" Tom asked, pulling up the recorded transmission. Jake had seen it. Ambassador Vrex of the Kralix Empire, one of the most powerful species in the Council, had called humanity the galaxy's most disappointing discovery during a live debate. He'd actually laughed while saying it, his reptilian face twisted in amusement as other Council members joined in the mockery. "I saw it," Jake replied quietly. "And I filed it with the other 400 insults we've recorded this year. How long do we keep taking this, sir?" Tom's frustration was evident. "They treat our space like a public highway. They mock us on their broadcast. Last week, a Kralix survey ship came within 1,000,000 kilometers of Mars and didn't even bother to scan for defenses. They just assume we're too primitive to have any." Jake understood the anger. Every person working in this facility felt it. They were sitting on the most advanced military technology Earth had ever created, forced to hide it while aliens disrespected humanity daily. Out beyond Neptune, massive shipyards operated in complete darkness, building warships that would make the Council's fleet look like antiques. In the asteroid belt, weapons research facilities tested railguns and energy shields that pushed the boundaries of physics. On the far side of the moon, training facilities prepared pilots for spacecraft the Council didn't know existed. "We keep taking it until they give us a real reason to respond," Jake said, his voice low and controlled. "President Rodriguez isn't waiting for insults, Tom. She's waiting for action. The day the Council crosses from words to deeds, that's when Earth stops being silent." Amy spoke up again from her station. "Sir, intelligence is picking up chatter from the Council. Looks like Ambassador Vrex is proposing something big in tomorrow's session. They're calling it a Class D designation proposal." Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Class D designations were used for uninhabited systems that could be exploited for resources or used as dumping grounds for industrial waste. "Pull everything we have on Class D protocols. I want to know exactly what he's planning." As his crew worked, Jake stared at the holographic display showing Earth in the center, surrounded by layers of hidden defenses the Council couldn't see. Humanity had used these decades wisely. While the aliens laughed and mocked, Earth had built an invisible wall around its home. The technology came from brilliant minds who'd had 43 years to study alien science and improve on it. The weapons came from engineers who designed systems specifically to counter Council defenses. The strategy came from military planners who'd studied every Council battle and identified every weakness. "Commander," Amy said softly, walking over to stand beside him. Do you really think they'll give us that reason? To break silence. Jake thought about his daughter, Emily, who was starting college next month. She'd grown up in a world where aliens were real but unreachable, where humanity knew it wasn't alone but chose to stay quiet anyway. She'd asked him once why Earth didn't just say hello, make friends with the aliens like in the old movies. He'd told her the truth. Sometimes the smart move isn't to announce yourself. Sometimes you watch, you learn, and you wait until you're ready. You don't walk into a room full of strangers and immediately trust them. You figure out who they are first. Yeah, Jake finally answered Amy. I think they will. The council's gotten comfortable treating us like we don't matter. Comfortable people make mistakes. And when they do, when they finally cross that line from insults to actual threats, the whole galaxy is going to find out what Earth's silence really built. He turned back to his crew, all of them watching him with a mixture of frustration and determination. Stay sharp, everyone. Keep monitoring everything. The day is coming when we stop being the galaxy's joke. And I want to make sure when we speak, we only have to say it once. The council chamber broadcast reached Earth at exactly 2:37 in the afternoon, Greenwich Mean Time. Across the planet, billions of people tuned in to watch what everyone assumed would be another routine political session. Students watched in classrooms. Workers streamed it on their phones during lunch breaks. Families gathered around their televisions at home. For 43 years, humanity had been watching these aliens debate and argue, always wondering when Earth would finally be mentioned in a respectful way. Instead, they got Ambassador Vrex. The Kralix representative stood at the central podium, his scaled reptilian body gleaming under the chamber lights. His species was one of the council's most powerful, controlling vast territories and commanding enormous military resources. When Vrex spoke, the galaxy listened. And today he was talking about Earth. Esteemed council members, Vrex began, his voice carrying that strange clicking undertone that his species had. I come before you with a practical proposal regarding the Sol system. For 43 years, we have extended invitations to the human species. For 43 years, they have offered nothing but silence in return. President Elena Rodriguez watched from the Oval Office, her chief of staff David Miller standing beside her. Something about Vrex's tone made her uneasy. This wasn't going to be another simple invitation. Clearly, Vrex continued, a smirk visible even on his alien features. These creatures lack the basic intelligence to communicate with civilized species. They cannot even manage a simple greeting. I ask you, my fellow council members, why should we continue to waste valuable space on beings too primitive to acknowledge our existence? Nervous laughter rippled through the council chamber. Representatives from dozens of different species shifted in their seats, unsure where this was heading. Vrex pressed on, his confidence growing. I propose we formally designate the Sol system as a Class D dumping zone. The humans are clearly too backward to even notice what we do in their space. Their oceans are vast and deep, perfect for disposing of industrial waste. Their atmosphere could absorb our excess emissions. And best of all, they lack the capacity to complain about it. The laughter grew louder. Species from across the galaxy found genuine humor in Vrex's proposal. Some representatives were actually applauding. They're the galaxy's greatest joke. Vrex declared, playing to his audience now. 43 years of silence. Not a word, not a signal, not even a primitive radio response. I say we stop treating empty space with more respect than it deserves. Let's put the Sol system to practical use. In the White House, Elena's hands gripped the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles turned white. David stood frozen beside her, his face pale with shock and anger. Madam President, David managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. The phone lines are exploding. Social media is going insane. Everyone's calling for a response. Elena didn't answer immediately. She was watching Vrex bask in the applause of the council, watching alien species she'd hoped might one day be friends laughing at humanity like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. 43 years of patient observation, of careful study and preparation, and this was how the galaxy saw Earth. As a dumping ground. As a joke. Get me Commander Morrison, Elena said, her voice cold and controlled. And convene the National Security Council immediately. Every member, no exceptions. Within 6 hours, 3 Kralix survey ships entered Earth's atmosphere without warning and without permission. They descended over the Pacific Ocean, their sensors sweeping across the water in methodical patterns. The ships broadcast their findings back to Kralix command in plain language that Earth's satellites picked up easily. They were marking coordinates, identifying what their transmissions called optimal waste deposit zones. They were actually planning to go through with it. Robert Hayes, a fisherman working off the coast of Oregon, was the first civilian to spot one of the ships. The massive vessel hovered about 500 feet above the water, its dark hull blocking out the afternoon sun. Robert grabbed his radio and started calling the Coast Guard, but he wasn't the only one. Up and down the western seaboard, people were reporting the same thing. Alien ships flying low, scanning the ocean like they owned it. Then one of the ships opened its cargo bay. Robert watched in horror as a thick, luminous liquid poured from the alien vessel into the ocean below. The substance glowed an unnatural green color and spread across the water's surface like oil, except it moved against the current, almost like it was alive. The smell hit him moments later, a chemical stench so powerful it made his eyes water. "Oh God," Robert whispered, watching the contamination spread. What did they just do? Within 24 hours the answer became terribly clear. Fish started washing up on beaches from California to Washington, their bodies twisted and discolored. Seabirds fell from the sky. And then people started getting sick. Thousands of them. Coastal residents reported breathing problems, skin rashes, and severe nausea. Hospitals filled up fast. The substance Vrex's ships had dumped wasn't just industrial waste. It was experimental chemical byproduct from Kralix weapons testing, highly toxic to most forms of life. Emily Morrison, Commander Jake's daughter, was one of the people who got sick. She'd been at the beach with friends when the contamination reached the shore. By that evening she was in the hospital, struggling to breathe as doctors frantically tried to figure out how to treat exposure to an alien toxin. Jake stood beside her hospital bed, watching machines monitor her vital signs, and felt something break inside him. This wasn't about politics anymore. This wasn't about military strategy or diplomatic patience. They'd poisoned his daughter. They'd poisoned thousands of innocent people. And they'd done it while laughing about how stupid humanity was. His phone rang. President Rodriguez. Commander Morrison. Elena's voice was steady but Jake could hear the steel underneath. "How's Emily?" "Stable for now, ma'am," Jake replied. "Doctors say she'll recover, but a lot of people won't be so lucky. I'm hearing reports of at least 40 deaths already." "I know," Elena said quietly. "Jake, I'm ending the silence. Right now. I need you back at ODF command immediately. We're sending a message." "What message, ma'am?" "2 words," Elena replied. "Leave. Now." The transmission went out 30 minutes later on every frequency the Council used. Earth's first communication in 43 years was brutally simple. No explanations, no diplomatic language, no requests. Just a command. Leave. Now. At the Council chambers, Vrex was still celebrating his successful waste disposal operation when the human transmission came through. He listened to it once, then played it again, and then he started laughing. Other Council members joined in. The primitive humans had finally spoken, and all they could manage was 2 words. "Leave now." Vrex repeated mockingly to the assembled Council. This is what they learned in 43 years? 2-word sentences. He turned to his military advisor with a predatory grin. "Prepare my personal fleet. 12 warships should be more than enough. These humans need to learn respect and I'm going to teach them personally. We'll establish the waste operation properly, with orbital bombardment if necessary. The galaxy needs to see what happens to species that issue commands to the Kralix Empire." His advisor hesitated. "Sir, perhaps we should exercise caution. We don't actually know what defensive capabilities they might have." Vrex's laughter cut him off. Defensive capabilities? They couldn't even say hello for 43 years. They're primitives playing at being relevant. "I'll have this resolved in a week and the Council will thank me for it." As Vrex's fleet prepared to depart for Earth, President Rodriguez sat in the Situation Room surrounded by her top military and intelligence officials. Commander Morrison had made it back and stood beside the main display screen. "Madam President," Jake said quietly, "Vrex is bringing 12 warships. He's broadcasting his intentions openly. He thinks this is going to be easy." Elena looked around the room at the faces of people who'd spent decades preparing for this moment. "Then let's show him exactly how wrong he is. Commander Morrison, you have full authorization. Decloak the fleet. Retry." Ambassador Vrex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Claw, watching the viewscreen display Earth's solar system spread out before him. 11 other Kralix warships flew in perfect formation around his vessel, their hulls bristling with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. This was going to be embarrassingly easy, and Vrex was already planning the victory speech he'd deliver to the Council. "Sir, we're approaching the outer boundary of the Sol system," his tactical officer reported. Sensors show no defensive installations, no patrol ships, nothing. The system appears completely undefended. Vrex nodded with satisfaction. Exactly as expected. These primitive humans couldn't even build a simple orbital defense platform, let alone a proper military fleet. He'd been right all along. Earth was nothing but wasted space, and he was going to put it to proper use. Maintain current speed, Vrex ordered. Broadcast my message on all human frequencies. Let them hear what's about to happen. The communications officer activated the transmission, and Vrex's voice boomed across every radio and television frequency Earth possessed. He wanted maximum impact, wanted every human to understand their complete helplessness. Humans of Earth, Vrex began, savoring each word. Your pathetic two-word message has been received and rejected. You do not give orders to the Kralix Empire. You do not dictate terms to your superiors. I am entering your system with 12 warships, each capable of reducing your cities to ash. You have 1 hour to surrender complete authority over your planet and your system. You will accept the waste disposal operations. You will accept Kralix governance. You will learn your place in the galactic order. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. If you refuse, I will demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Your largest population centers will be bombarded from orbit. Your infrastructure will be destroyed. And when you finally beg for mercy, I will make you wait before I grant it. You have 1 hour. Use it wisely. The transmission ended, and Vrex settled back into his command chair with a satisfied smile. His sensors continued sweeping the system, finding nothing but empty space and a few primitive satellites. In 60 minutes this would all be over. Meanwhile, 384 million kilometers away, Commander Jake Morrison sat in the Orbital Defense Network Command Center, surrounded by the most advanced technology Earth had ever created. His fingers drummed against the armrest of his chair as he watched the countdown clock tick away. Around him, 200 officers and crew members worked in focused silence, each one knowing that the next hour would change human history forever. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez monitored the Kralix fleet's approach vector, tracking their every movement. Sir, enemy ships maintaining standard formation. They're not even running deep scans. They think we're not here. Good, Jake replied calmly. Let them keep thinking that. Lieutenant Tom Bradley looked up from the weapons station, his face eager. Sir, all fleet elements report ready. 473 ships standing by on your order. Every railgun is charged. Every reactor is at full power. We can light them up right now. Jake shook his head. Not yet. We wait. But sir. We wait, Jake repeated firmly. I want them deeper into the system. I want them committed. And I want them to have absolutely no chance of escape when we show ourselves. The truth was, Earth's defensive fleet had been in position for 3 days already, ever since intelligence confirmed Vrex was assembling his task force. Human warships surrounded the moon, orbited Mars, and stationed themselves throughout the asteroid belt. They'd been there all along, hidden by cloaking technology that bent light and scattered sensor beams. The Council thought such technology was impossible. They were wrong about a lot of things. Jake thought about his daughter Emily, still recovering in the hospital from the chemical poisoning. He thought about the 47 people who died from Vrex's toxic waste dump. He thought about 43 years of insults and mockery, of being dismissed as primitive and worthless. All of that anger, all of that frustration, it had been compressed and focused into this single moment. 15 minutes to optimal firing range, Amy reported. Across the solar system, captains and commanders aboard 473 human warships prepared their crews. These weren't the clunky spacecraft from old science fiction movies. These were sleek, deadly machines built specifically to counter everything Earth's analysts had learned about Council military doctrine. The ships ran on compact fusion reactors that generated more power than anything the Council possessed. Their hulls were composed of carbon nanotube composites that could shrug off energy weapons. And their primary armament, the railguns, represented a weapons technology the Council had abandoned centuries ago as primitive. That had been their mistake. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the ODS Defiance, one of the largest ships in Earth's fleet. She watched her tactical display showing the Kralix vessels approaching, still completely unaware of the trap closing around them. Her weapons officer, a young man named Dylan Park, kept glancing at her nervously. Captain, permission to speak freely? Dylan asked. Go ahead. Do you think this'll really work? I mean, they've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've never fired a shot in anger. Lisa smiled grimly. Dylan, we've had 43 years to study every battle they ever fought. We know their tactics better than they do. We know their shield frequencies, their armor composition, their reactor outputs, everything. They're experienced, sure. But they're also predictable. And arrogance makes you sloppy. Back at ODF command, the countdown hit 10 minutes. Jake opened a secure channel to President Rodriguez in the White House. Madam President, Kralix's fleet is approaching optimal engagement range. Requesting authorization to execute defensive protocols. Elena's face appeared on his screen, her expression resolute. Behind her, Jake could see the entire National Security Council gathered. Commander Morrison, you are authorized to defend Earth by any means necessary. Show them what our silence built. Yes, ma'am, Jake replied. He switched to fleet-wide communications, his voice reaching every ship, every crew member, every human who'd spent years preparing for this moment. All vessels, this is Morrison. You know what they did to our people. You know what they think of us. Today we teach the galaxy a lesson it won't forget. On my mark, decloak and engage. Make every shot count. The countdown hit 5 minutes. Vrex's fleet continued its approach, sensors still showing nothing but empty space. 4 minutes. Human crews made final weapon checks and targeting solutions. 3 minutes. Jake thought about what he'd tell Emily when this was over. 2 minutes. Across the fleet, safeties clicked off and firing computers locked onto their targets. 1 minute. Jake took a deep breath. Decloak, he ordered. All vessels. Let them see what silence built. Across the solar system, 473 human warships shimmered into existence like ghosts becoming solid. They appeared everywhere at once, surrounding the moon, emerging from behind Mars, rising from the asteroid belt. The Kralix sensors went absolutely insane, alarms shrieking as targets materialized from nowhere. On Vrex's bridge, chaos erupted. Officers shouted over each other, trying to make sense of the impossible data flooding their screens. Contact. Multiple contacts. Hundreds of them. Where did they come from? Sir, we're surrounded. They're everywhere. Vrex stared at his view screen in complete shock as the human fleet revealed itself. This wasn't possible. The humans were primitive. They didn't have spacecraft. They didn't have weapons. They didn't have anything. Evasive action. Vrex screamed. All ships, evasive maneuvers now. But Jake had spent years studying Kralix tactics. He knew exactly how they'd react to a surprise. He knew they'd break formation and scatter, trying to create distance. He planned for it. Fire, Jake said quietly. The word was barely a whisper, but it unleashed devastation. 473 railguns fired simultaneously, accelerating tungsten projectiles to relativistic speeds using electromagnetic coils that stretched the length of each ship. The rounds crossed millions of kilometers in seconds, moving too fast for Kralix point defense systems to track. The first Kralix warship exploded as 3 tungsten rods punched through its shields and hull like they weren't even there. The energy release from the impacts vaporized the vessel's fusion core, creating a brief new star in the darkness. Then the second ship died. Then 2 more simultaneously. Then 3 at once. Vrex watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. Return fire. Destroy them. But it was hopeless. Kralix energy weapons splashed harmlessly against human shields calibrated specifically to deflect their frequencies. Their missiles detonated against point defense grids that tracked hundreds of targets simultaneously. In 90 seconds, 11 Kralix warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Cease fire, Jake ordered. The human fleet fell silent. Only Vrex's flagship remained intact, completely surrounded by human warships. Jake opened a direct communication channel, his face appearing on every screen aboard the dominant claw. Ambassador Vrex, you wanted Earth to speak. We're speaking now. Are you listening? The boarding shuttle detached from the ODS Defiance and drifted across the void toward Vrex's crippled flagship. Inside the small craft, Commander Jake Morrison sat with 20 heavily armed Marines, each one checking their equipment one final time. The atmosphere was tense but focused. Everyone knew what was at stake. Sergeant Kevin Webb, a 15-year veteran of Earth's Secret Space Force, looked over at Jake with concern. Sir, we're walking into their ship. What if this is a trap? What if they're planning to ambush us the moment we step through that airlock? Jake appreciated the caution, but he'd been monitoring the Kralix communications since their fleet got destroyed. They won't, Sergeant. Trust me. Their entire crew is terrified. Half of them think we're going to execute everyone on board. The other half is hoping we'll just take prisoners and leave them alive. Are we? Another Marine asked quietly. Taking prisoners? We're not here to start a massacre, Jake replied firmly. We're here to deliver a message. A very clear, very permanent message that the galaxy won't forget. Through the shuttle viewport, Jake could see the damage his fleet had inflicted on Vrex's ship. The flagship was intact but barely. Scorch marks covered the hull where near misses had melted the armor. Several weapons arrays hung loose, sparking with electrical fires. The ship was running on emergency power only, life support systems operating at minimal capacity to conserve energy. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang that echoed through both vessels. Jake stood and checked his sidearm, more out of habit than necessity. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, who'd insisted on joining the boarding party, moved to stand beside him. "Ready, Commander?" she asked. "Let's go teach some aliens about respect," Jake replied. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Jake led his team into the Kralix vessel, weapons ready, expecting resistance or at least some show of defiance. Instead, they found Ambassador Vrex's entire command crew standing in the main corridor with their arms raised in surrender. About 60 Kralix soldiers and officers lined the walls, their weapons discarded on the floor, their reptilian faces showing an emotion that Jake recognized immediately even across species lines. Pure, undiluted fear. At the front of the group stood Vrex himself. The arrogant ambassador who'd mocked humanity before the entire galaxy now looked small and defeated. His scales, which had gleamed so proudly during his council speech, were now dull and faded. His voice shook when he spoke. "Commander Morrison," Vrex said through his translator device. We surrender. Completely and unconditionally. Please, no more firing. We yield." Jake walked forward slowly, his boots echoing on the metal deck plating. He stopped about 3 meters from Vrex, close enough to see the alien's eyes darting nervously. "Take me to your bridge. Now." Vrex led them through corridors filled with more surrendered crew members. Young Kralix soldiers who'd probably never seen real combat before pressed themselves against the walls as the humans passed, trying to make themselves as small as possible. The ship's interior was a mess. Damaged consoles sparked and flickered. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. The air smelled of ozone and burnt electronics. The bridge was even worse. Half the stations were completely destroyed, their operators having abandoned them during the brief but devastating battle. The main view screen flickered, showing the human fleet maintaining a perfect perimeter around the crippled flagship. 473 warships, each one pointed directly at Vrex's vessel. It was a show of force designed to drive home exactly how outmatched the Kralix had been. Jake walked to the center of the bridge and turned to face Vrex directly. The alien ambassador stood there trembling, surrounded by his command staff who all looked like they wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. "Did you know," Jake began conversationally, "that we've been listening to Council transmissions for 73 years? Not 43. 73. We detected your communications networks before you even knew Earth existed as an inhabited world." Vrex's eyes widened in shock. That meant humanity had been aware of the Council for 3 decades before the Council discovered Earth. Jake continued, pulling up a holographic display from a portable projector. "We learned every major language in the Council. All 17 of them. We studied your history, your wars, your political systems. We analyzed every military engagement you've fought in the past century." Images flashed across the hologram showing battle after battle, tactical analyses, weapon specifications. "We know your standard formations, your preferred tactics, your shield frequencies, your armor composition, your reactor outputs. We know everything about you." He zoomed in on the Kralix Empire specifically. "We know that your species relies heavily on energy weapons because you consider kinetic weapons primitive and outdated. We know your shields are calibrated to stop plasma and particle beams. We know your tactical doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower over maneuverability." Jake smiled coldly. "So we built ships specifically designed to exploit every single one of those weaknesses." Lieutenant Amy pulled up another display, this one showing footage of every Council vessel that had violated Earth space over the past 4 decades. Hundreds of incidents, all recorded, all catalogued. Then came the recordings of Vrex's own speeches, his insults, his mockery of humanity. "You thought we were too stupid to notice when your ships treated our system like a highway," Jake said, his voice hardening. "You were wrong. You thought we were too primitive to understand your transmissions. Wrong again. And you thought you could dump poison in our oceans, make our people sick, kill our citizens without any consequences." His expression turned to stone. "That was your biggest mistake." Vrex found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. I didn't know. The Council believed. The Council believed what it wanted to believe, Jake interrupted. That humans were primitive. That we were backward. That we were too stupid to matter. You never bothered to actually check whether any of that was true. You just assumed because that made you feel superior. He gestured to Amy, who activated the ship's communication system. Every light on the console turned green, indicating that the transmission would broadcast on every council frequency across the entire galaxy. Here's what's going to happen now, Jake said to Vrex. You're going to make a broadcast. On every council channel. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here today. You're going to apologize to humanity for the insults, for the violations of our space, and especially for poisoning our planet. And you're going to recommend that the Sol system be declared restricted space under human sovereign authority. The Council will never accept, Vrex started. The Council just watched you lose 12 warships in 90 seconds, Jake cut him off. They watched a species you called too stupid to say hello completely destroy your fleet without losing a single vessel. They saw us use technology they thought was impossible. Trust me, Ambassador. They'll listen. Because now they're wondering what else we've been building while they weren't paying attention. Vrex stood there silently for a long moment, the weight of his defeat crushing down on him. Finally he nodded. What do you want me to say? The truth, Jake replied simply. Tell them you underestimated us. Tell them you attacked our world and we defended ourselves. Tell them that human space is now off limits to any council vessel that doesn't have explicit permission to enter. And tell them that if anyone else decides to test us, they'll end up just like your fleet. 2 hours later, Vrex's face appeared on every council communication channel across the galaxy. His voice shook with humiliation as he recounted his defeat. He described how Earth's hidden fleet had appeared from nowhere and destroyed his ships in less than 2 minutes. He formally apologized to humanity for the toxic waste dumping, for the deaths of Earth citizens, for every insult and violation. And he recommended, in the strongest possible terms, that the Galaxy Council recognize Earth as a sovereign military power and declare human space absolutely restricted. The broadcast lasted 15 minutes. When it ended, Vrex looked at Jake with hollow eyes. Are you going to execute me now? Jake shook his head. No. You're going home. You're going to return to the Council and explain in person what happened here. You're going to be a living reminder of what happens when someone crosses humanity's line. He leaned in closer. An ambassador? If any Council ship enters our space without permission from this moment forward, we won't disable it. We'll destroy it completely. No warnings. No second chances. No survivors. You tell them that. The human boarding party returned to their shuttle, leaving Vrex and his crew aboard their crippled vessel. As they flew back to the Defiance, Amy looked at Jake with a mixture of pride and relief. We really did it, sir. We made them listen. Jake nodded, thinking about Emily recovering in her hospital bed back on Earth. Yeah, we did. And they're never going to forget it. The Galaxy Council emergency session convened exactly 18 hours after Vrex's humiliating broadcast reached every corner of civilized space. The massive chamber, which normally hosted orderly debates and carefully planned political theater, had descended into complete chaos. Representatives from 67 different species shouted over each other, their translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping arguments. Some demanded immediate military retaliation against Earth. Others insisted on diplomatic outreach. A few simply sat in stunned silence, still processing what they'd witnessed. General Throck of the Kralix Military Command stood at the central podium, his massive frame radiating barely controlled rage. This insult cannot stand, he roared, slamming his clawed fist against the podium hard enough to crack it. A primitive species destroyed 12 of our warships. They humiliated Ambassador Vrex. They threatened the entire council with destruction. We must respond with overwhelming force immediately. Ambassador Kelly of the Saren Collective rose from her seat, her delicate features twisted in disgust. Insult? You want to talk about insults, General? What about calling them too stupid to notice toxic waste? What about treating their home system like a garbage dump? What about poisoning their planet and killing their people? They are primitives. Throck shot back. They have no right to. They have every right to defend themselves. Kelly interrupted, her voice rising. And they just proved they're anything but primitive. Those weren't lucky shots, General. That was precision military action from a species that clearly knew exactly what it was doing. Maybe the question isn't why they responded, but why we provoked them in the first place. Across the chamber, representatives began choosing sides. The smaller species, those who'd long chafed under Kralix dominance, started speaking up in support of Earth. The military powers aligned with the Kralix demanded action. The debate raged on for hours with no resolution in sight. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Elena Rodriguez sat in the Oval Office watching the council session with Commander Jake Morrison appearing via secure video link from the ODF Command Center. Secretary of State Robert Chin stood beside her desk, reviewing reports that had been flooding in since Vrex's broadcast. "They're completely divided," Elena observed, watching another shouting match erupt on the screen. "Half of them want our heads, the other half is questioning whether the Kralix should even be leading the council anymore." Jake's voice came through the speakers, calm and measured. "Let them argue, Madam President. Meanwhile, our patrol routes are fully established. Every approach vector to the solar system is covered. If any council ship crosses into our space without authorization, we'll know about it immediately. Commander, we're detecting multiple encrypted transmissions coming from the council chambers." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez's voice joined the call. "Looks like at least 3 species are trying to open back-channel communications with us. The Saren Collective, the Mindo Federation, and the Talix Republic." Elena leaned forward with interest. "All smaller powers. All historically overshadowed by the Kralix Empire. They see an opportunity," Robert added. "Earth just proved we can stand up to the Kralix military. These species are probably hoping we might provide a counterbalance to Kralix dominance in the council." As if to confirm Robert's analysis, his assistant entered the Oval Office carrying a tablet. "Mr. Secretary, we've received 14 formal requests for trade negotiations from various council species. 32 more want to establish preliminary diplomatic channels. And..." He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. "The Galaxy Council itself has sent an official invitation for President Rodriguez to address them." Elena raised an eyebrow. "As a supplicant begging for membership?" "No, ma'am," the assistant replied. "The language is very specific. They're inviting you as a representative of a sovereign power. They're offering full council membership with all associated rights, protections, and voting privileges." Jake's laugh came through the speakers. "3 weeks ago we were too primitive to notice toxic waste being dumped in our oceans. Now we're equals. Funny how 12 destroyed warships can completely change diplomatic perspectives." Over the next several days, the political landscape continued shifting. Vrex was formally removed from his position as Chief Kralix Ambassador, facing charges within his own government for the military disaster. The Kralix Empire issued an official statement recalling all vessels from human space and extending formal apologies for the chemical dumping incident. Compensation negotiations began for the families of the 47 people who died and the thousands who'd been injured. But the biggest changes were happening behind the scenes. Species that had never dared to openly challenge Kralix policies were suddenly finding their voices. The Saren Collective proposed new council regulations regarding the treatment of emerging civilizations. The Mindo Federation suggested mandatory authorization requirements for any military vessels entering another species' territory. The Talix Republic called for a complete review of the Class D designation system that Vrex had tried to apply to Earth. Jake Morrison watched all of this unfold from the ODF Command Center, where his daughter Emily had come to visit after being released from the hospital. She was still weak but recovering well. She sat beside her father's command chair, looking at the displays showing Earth's defensive fleet patrolling the solar system. "Dad," Emily said quietly, "are we safe now? Will they leave us alone?" Jake thought about how to answer that. "Sweetheart, we're safer than we've ever been. The galaxy knows now that humanity isn't weak. We're not victims. We don't bow down to bullies. But staying safe means staying vigilant. We can't let our guard down." "Will there be a war?" Emily asked, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't think so," Jake replied honestly. "The council is afraid of us right now. They thought they knew everything about warfare, about technology, about strategy. Then we showed them something completely unexpected. That fear will keep most of them in line. The smart ones will want to be our friends instead of our enemies." Lieutenant Tom Bradley approached with a data pad. "Sir, we're picking up another transmission. It's Ambassador Vrex. He's being escorted back to Kralix Prime under guard. Looks like he's facing a military tribunal for his failures." Jake nodded slowly. He didn't take pleasure in Vrex's downfall, but the ambassador had made his choices. He'd chosen arrogance over caution. He'd chosen insults over respect. And he'd chosen to poison innocent people rather than treat humanity as equals. Now he was paying the price. 3 months after the battle, President Elena Rodriguez stood before the Galaxy Council in person for the first time. The chamber fell absolutely silent as she approached the central podium, flanked by Commander Morrison and a full security detail. Thousands of beings from dozens of species watched her, some with curiosity, some with lingering hostility, many with newfound respect. Elena placed her hands on the podium and looked out across the assembled representatives. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the translation systems. "For 73 years, humanity listened to you," she began. "We heard your debates, your arguments, your plans. We watched you build your civilization across the stars. We could have announced ourselves at any time. We could have asked to join you, begged for your acceptance. But we chose a different path. We chose to learn first, to understand who we were dealing with before we committed ourselves." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Many of you mistook our patience for ignorance, our silence for stupidity, our caution for weakness. Ambassador Vrex wasn't alone in those beliefs. He was just the one who acted on them. And when he crossed the line from insults to attacks, when he poisoned our world and killed our people, he learned the truth about humanity. We don't forget," Elena continued, her voice hardening slightly. "We don't forgive easily. And we absolutely do not surrender. But we're also not here seeking revenge or dominance. We're here to build something better. A future where species treat each other with respect, where strength doesn't mean the right to exploit the weak, where different civilizations can coexist as genuine equals." Ambassador Kelly of the Saren Collective stood and began applauding. The sound started slowly but built quickly as more representatives joined in. Not everyone participated. The Kralix delegation sat in stony silence, along with a few of their closest allies. But the majority of the council recognized the significance of the moment. "Earth is willing to work with this council," Elena said as the applause faded. "We have technology to share, perspectives to offer, and capabilities that might surprise you. But we come as partners, not subordinates. Human space remains under our sovereign control. Our military remains our own. Our decisions remain ours to make. All we ask in return is the same respect we're willing to extend to you." The vote to grant Earth full council membership passed by an overwhelming margin. Only the Kralix Empire and two of their client states opposed it. Back on Earth, billions of people watched the historic moment. Jake stood in his daughter's hospital room, now converted to a regular room as she neared full recovery, and they watched together as humanity officially joined the galactic community. "We did it," Emily said softly. "We're part of something bigger now." "Yeah," Jake agreed. "But on our terms. That's what matters. We didn't beg our way in. We didn't compromise who we are. We stood our ground, defended our people, and made them see us as equals." As President Rodriguez concluded her address and the council moved to formal ceremonies, Jake's communicator buzzed. It was Lieutenant Amy with a report from the patrol fleet. "Commander, all sectors report clear. No unauthorized vessels detected. The Kralix are keeping their distance, and several friendly species have requested permission to send diplomatic ships. All properly cleared through official channels this time." "Good," Jake replied. "Keep monitoring everything. This piece is new. We need to make sure it lasts." Emily looked up at her father. "Do you think it will? Last, I mean?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I think the galaxy learned an important lesson. They learned that underestimating humanity is dangerous. They learned that we're not afraid to defend ourselves. And most importantly, they learned that we meant what we said. When we drew that line and told them not to cross it, we weren't bluffing." He smiled at his daughter. "Sometimes peace doesn't come from being friendly. Sometimes it comes from being strong enough that nobody wants to fight you." On the view screen, the Council formally recognized Earth's sovereignty and welcomed humanity into the galactic community. The silent observers had become impossible to ignore, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Jake Morrison watched it all unfold and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 43 years of patience. 73 years of preparation. And now, finally, Earth stood as an equal among the stars. The lesson was delivered. The message was clear. And the galaxy had learned it well. You don't mess with humanity.